Welcome to today's Semiahmoo Men's Breakfast Club virtual presentation. This is Dave Liu, your treasurer and host of this presentation. The presentation's topic is the sea explorers who discovered our area. In researching this topic, it was difficult for me to determine which explorers to include and which explorers not to include. Since our first virtual presentation was on the Lummi Nation, who, in my opinion, were the original discoverers of our area, dating back many thousands of years, I have decided to focus on those who have explored this area after them. It is an arbitrary decision on my part, but I want to present new information to you. I wish to make an attempt to inform you of others who braved uncharted waters and territories to reach our shores. From my research, it appears to me that the first post-Lummi explorers in our area were the Chinese between 458 and 499 AD. In 458 AD, a Chinese monk named Wei Shan, accompanied by 4 other monks, sailed north to Japan and the Kamchatka Peninsula. Then they turned eastward to the Aleutians and present-day Alaska. And then finally they turned south along the Pacific coast, a region called Fusheng. Fusheng apparently encompassed the entire Pacific coast from Alaska to Baja California. Wei Shan's descriptions of the native peoples and their customs are detailed and accurate based on what modern historians know about these ancient cultures. This epic journey, sailed in Chinese junks, is recorded in official documents of the Sung dynasty for the year 499 AD, when the monks returned to China. Their journey was further described in the 7th century book of Liang by Ya Xiaoliong, which describes his voyage in both known and uncharted lands. Fusheng was reported as some 20,000 Chinese li, which is about 9,000 kilometers, east of Kamchatka, which would place it somewhere in the current-day British Columbia or the U.S. Pacific Northwest. Modern historians generally accept the Chinese account as authentic, but larger debate is over the significance of the voyage. The 5 monks did not claim Fusheng for their emperor, as their expedition was not one of conquest. Their intent apparently was only to observe and learn, and as such, their visit is little more than a historical footnote, a curiosity. What is not known is whether they entered what we now call the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and then sailed on into the Puget Sound, or up to the Salish Sea and the waters that lap at our shore here in Semiahmoo. Given that this is a mystery, I just note that Wei Shan was the first documented explorer to sail down the coast of Washington nearly 1,100 years before the arrival of European explorers. There have been many early European explorers that sailed along the western coast of North America, but few of them ventured into the dangerous waters of the Salish Sea. You must remember that these were the days of sail, and it took great courage to turn a sailing ship into waters of unknown depth, unknown shoals, unknown tidal currents, and narrow passages. Most of these early explorers opted to sail offshore, noting in the distance where bays and inlets were, but not daring to enter them in fear of losing their vessel and being stranded in an unknown hostile land. The first known explorer who entered the Salish Sea was Juan de Fuca. He was a Greek navigator who sailed for Spain under a Spanish name. His original name was Ionius Phocas. Juan de Fuca sailed up the western coast of North America from Mexico to Vancouver Island in 1592. He was looking for a passage from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean. Ionius Phocas was born in 1536 on the Greek island of Cephalonia, within the Ionian Sea. He He was a descendant of Greek refugees from the fall of Constantinople in 1453. His father settled in the village of Valernio. The extension of Spanish dominion on the neighboring shores of Italy provided many opportunities to the seafaring men of the Ionian Islands to serve on Spanish ships as crews or officers. Taking advantage of these opportunities, Phocas went to Spain in 1555, where he embarked on Spanish ships as a skilled sailor. And, after a time, he took on the Spanish name of Juan de Fuca. Over time, he went through a series of promotions and became captain of a series of ships. His knowledge and skills attracted the attention of the King of Spain, who appointed him pilot of his navy in the West Indies and New Spain. Once there, Fuca's voyages included sailing to the Far East, especially to the Philippines and China, before returning to New Spain in 1587. In 1591, the Viceroy of New Spain commissioned a 3-ship expedition to find the Pacific end of the fabled Northwest Passage, also referred to as the Strait of Anian. Juan de Fuca served as the pilot for the expedition and master of one of the 3 ships, but overall the command was given to a Spanish conquistador. Armed with Sebastian Munster's map of the New World, first published in 1540, along with 200 soldiers, the 3 ships set sail. Unfortunately, the expedition failed when the soldiers revolted against the harsh conditions caused by the conquistador, and the fleet returned to New Spain. The second voyage, in 1592, was smaller than the first, with just a caravel and a pinnace under the command of Juan de Fuca. When de Fuca returned, he announced the discovery of a strait between 47 and 48 degrees north, and that he had sailed past a pillar of rock into the strait. This pillar is now called Fuca Pillar on Cape Flattery. He also reported that there was a large island at its mouth. Juan de Fuca stated that he spent 20 days exploring the many islands in the strait, which he described as fertile and richly endowed with gold, silver, pearls, and other spectacular things. Further exploration was deterred by the savagery of the local inhabitants. He eventually returned to Spain to claim rewards promised to him by the Spanish government, but he never collected a penny, and returned home to Greece angry and desolate. After his death in 1602, his story passed into legend. No Spanish records existed to verify de Fuca's claims. This was because Spain was notorious for its secrecy, which later complicated its territorial claims to the west coast. His own accounts were vague and confusing. If it weren't for an Englishman, John Locke, who wrote about de Fuca's voyages, historians might still doubt them. English mariners, due perhaps to de Fuca's proposal to work for Elizabeth I, believed his claims, however. In 1787, an English fur trader, Charles William Barclay, entered and named the strait after Juan de Fuca, which was later explored by a succession of Spanish and English mariners. Next known explorer to enter and explore parts of the Salish Sea was Manuel Quimper. Born in Peru in 1757, he was a Spanish-Peruvian explorer, cartographer, naval officer, and colonial official. Starting in 1774, Spain had sent several expeditions to Alaska to assert its long-held claim over the Pacific Northwest, which dated back to the 1500s. The Spanish court was becoming increasingly concerned about British and Russian incursions along the Pacific Northwest coast of North America. In July 1789, they received news from the Pacific Northwest with the arrival of the Princesa Real, a fur trading vessel captured from the British in Nootka Sound on Vancouver Island by Spanish Commodore Esteban José Martinez. In 1788, the British explorer John Meares had established a fur trading post at Nootka Sound. Spain considered this settlement an invasion of Spanish territory and had dispatched Martinez to occupy the port the following year. Martinez arrived in 1789 with warships and seized the port along with some vessels, including the ship Princess Royale, which he renamed the Princesa Real. The ship was dispatched to New Spain, putting it at the disposition of New Spain's viceroy. The viceroy, however, wished to avoid further difficulties with the British and ordered Quimper to return the vessel. On February 3, 1790, a Spanish expedition sailed north from San Blas, New Spain, under the command of Ship Lieutenant Francisco de Alaiza, the most senior officer available in San Blas. It included Ship Lieutenant Salvador Fidalgo and Ship Ensign Manuel Quimper. The purpose was to strengthen the settlement of Nootka Sound, to further chart the waters of the Straits of Juan de Fuca and the San Juan Islands, and to return the Princesa Real to the British. After several weeks at sea, the Princesa Real and Quimper arrived with difficulty at Nootka Sound, where repairs on the vessel were undertaken before returning the ship to the British. Throughout the month of May, the Princesa Real was repaired with no sign of the British. Quimper then used the vessel to carry out a 2-month exploration of the north and south coasts of the Straits of Juan de Fuca. During June and July, he charted and named many geographical features along the south shore of Vancouver Island and the north coast of the Olympic Peninsula. On the Olympic Peninsula, he traded with and observed the customs of indigenous people near Dungeness and near the Elwha River, which were most likely members of the Squam tribe in both instances, and he was possibly the first European they had seen. As he pushed further into the Salish Sea, he became the first European to report seeing a snow-covered mountain, which we now know as Mount Baker. Most of his discoveries along the strait were renamed by British Captain George Vancouver in 1792. Those which retained at least a semblance of his Spanish names include Port Angeles, Rosario Strait, Quimper Peninsula, and Fidalgo Island. During Quimper's 1791 expedition to the northern Salish Sea, his sloop stopped at the southern area of Bellingham Bay. During this brief encounter near the mouth of present-day Paddon Creek, several of Quimper's men reportedly ran across a group of hostile natives who were actually Luma Indians, and they drove Quimper's men back to the rowboat. In years later, during the construction of a powerhouse along the creek in Fairhaven, a gilded Spanish goblet and the deteriorated remains of a Spanish-type musket were rediscovered. By the 1790s, the British were well aware of the Spanish effort to maintain its claim on the Pacific Northwest. To assert Britain's claim, its sovereign, King George III, gave orders for an expedition, and in 1791, George Vancouver was given command of the HMS Discovery and the HMS Chatham. His orders were to sail to Australia and the South Pacific, the Hawaiian Islands, and the coastline of North America from the northern border of California to Alaska. At the same time, King George began to threaten Spain with war over the Pacific Northwest territories. In its first year, the expedition traveled to Cape Town, Australia, New Zealand, Tahiti, and Hawaii, collecting botanical samples and surveying coastlines along the way. He formally claimed King George Sound in Western Australia, now the location of the town of Albany. Proceeding to North America, Vancouver followed the coast of present-day Oregon and then northward to Washington. In April 1792, he encountered American Captain Robert Gray in his ship Columbia Redivia off the coast of Oregon, just prior to Gray's sailing up the Columbia River. Vancouver entered the Strait of Juan de Fuca on April 29, 1792. His orders included to survey every inlet and outlet on the west coast of the mainland, all the way north to Alaska. Most of this work was in small crafts propelled by both sail and oar. Maneuvering larger sail-powered vessels in uncharted waters was generally impractical and could be very dangerous. Vancouver named many features for his officers, friends, associates, and his ship Discovery, including Mount Baker, after Discovery's third lieutenant, Joseph Baker, the first on the expedition to spot it. Mount St. Helens, after his friend, Alan A. Fitzherbert, the first Baron of St. Helens. Puget Sound, after Discovery's second lieutenant, Peter Puget, who explored its southern reaches. Mount Rainier, after his friend, Rear Admiral Peter Rainier. Port Gardner and Port Susan, after his former commander, Vice Admiral Sir Alan Gardner, and his wife Susanna, Lady Gardner. Whidbey Island, after naval engineer Joseph Whidbey. And Discovery Passage, Discovery Island, Discovery Bay, and Port Discovery, of course, all named after his ship. Vancouver was the second European to enter Burrard Inlet on June 13, 1792, naming it for his friend Sir Harry Burrard. It is the present-day main harbor area of the city of Vancouver, beyond Stanley Park. He surveyed Howe Sound and Jarvis Inlet over the next 9 days. At the same time Vancouver was surveying Burrard Inlet, William Robert Broughton, skipper of the HMS Chatham and second in command of the British expedition under George Vancouver, was surveying a bit further south. When he was between Drayton Harbor and Point Roberts, Broughton encountered 2 Spanish ships. Led by Captain Galiano, these ships were a continuation of the 1790 and 91 surveying efforts of the Salish Sea started by Manuel Guemper, Jose Maria Narvaez. A week later, when Vancouver met this Spanish surveying expedition, he wrote in his ship's log that he was, quote, mortified, end quote, to learn that they already had crude charts of both the Strait of Juan de Fuca and the Strait of Georgia, dating back 2 years. As it turned out, Galiano and Vancouver struck up a friendship and agreed to assist one another by dividing up the surveying work and sharing charts. They worked together in this way until July 13th, after which each resumed circumnavigating Vancouver Island separately. Galiano's ship sailed north around the island, proving that it was in fact an island. They reached Nootka Sound, completing the circuit, on August 31st. Vancouver's ships had arrived earlier. At Nootka Sound, Vancouver was to receive any British buildings and lands returned by the Spanish from claims made by Francisco de Alasia for the Spanish crown. The Spanish commander, Juan Francisco Bodega y Quadra, was very cordial, and he and Vancouver exchanged the maps they had made, but no agreement was reached. They decided to await further instructions. At this time, they decided to name the large island on which Nootka was now proven to be located on as Quadra and Vancouver Island. Years later, as the Spanish influence declined, the name was shortened to simply Vancouver Island. As winter approached, Vancouver set sail south down the coast to California and then wintered in the Sandwich Islands, now called Hawaii. Eventually, Spain withdrew its claims on the Pacific Northwest. The French Revolutionary Wars from 1792 until 1802 and then the Napoleonic Wars from 1803 to 1815 drained the Spanish coffers such that they could not finance the development of the region, especially with the British and Americans moving into their regions, establishing fur trading posts, and later establishing farms and settlements. I hope you've enjoyed this short exploration into those mariners who discovered and explored our area around Semiahmoo. What I found intriguing while doing the research into this subject is that right in front of where we live, the two great powers that explored this area and almost went to war over its ownership literally ran into each other while surveying our coastline. Given our British heritage, it is George Vancouver who gets the credit in the history books for surveying our local area, but the truth of the matter is that, really, it was Spanish explorer and surveyor Captain Galiano who conducted the local survey and then shared his survey with Vancouver. The things that I discover while conducting historical research never ceases to amaze me. This is because, after all, the writing up or telling of history belongs to the one who prevails. This may or may not reflect the entire truth. It takes diligent research and uncovering of the facts to establish what the true matter is. Anyway, stay well in this coronavirus time, and I look forward to the next time we can all get together as a group, sharing breakfast, coffee, and then listening to one of our guest speakers.